Welcome to this video where I will install the luggage carrier crossrails on top of my 2018 Buick Enclave Avenir. Here I am opening up the box to confirm the contents before installation. Now the instructions, they come in English, Spanish, and French. So at the top of the front page, it shows what the kit includes. Of course, the front and rear crossrails, 8 M6 by 25mm bolts, 4 M6 by 16mm bolts, 1 9Nm torque wrench. The install instructions in my left hand. What's also required is a pry tool. I just used the plastic credit card. Now there's 5 steps for the install. The first step is to remove the 8 plugs from the roof side rails. So you take your plastic credit card, wedge it between the plug face and the roof side rail. Once wedged in, apply a little pressure on the head of the plug and unscrew twist the plug counterclockwise. If you don't plan on reinstalling the plugs at a later date, say you're going to sell your crossrails with the Enclave when that day does come, then a pry tool to just pull out the plugs will work. These plugs will likely just get warped and or damage destroyed if you just pull and yank them out. In the main picture, I'm removing the plugs from the front passenger side, while in the lower right of the video, I'm removing the plugs from the rear passenger side. In the next frame, I move over to the front driver's side and remove the 2 plugs from the front driver's side rail. And I conclude removing the 2 plugs from the rear driver's side. All in all, a total of 8 plugs removed. 2 from the front driver's side, 2 from the rear driver's side, 2 from the front passenger side, and 2 from the rear passenger side. As you can see, I have a piece of carpet laid on top of my roof of the Enclave to protect the paint and the glass from any unnecessary damage I might cause later. So now we move on to installing the crossrails. But first, here's a side shot close-up of the front crossrail and the rear crossrail. As you can see, there is a fitted rubber face that sits between the crossrail and the roof side rails on the Enclave, with 2 holes for the M6 by 25mm bolts. On the inside of the rails, it has placement guides to ensure you install the front and rear crossrail properly. The arrows denoting which faces forward. Now I'm positioning the front crossrail into place atop the roof side rails. Once in place, I make some minor adjustments to line up the holes for the M6 by 25mm bolts. Once the holes are lined up, I proceed to install the M6 by 25mm bolts and hand tighten them so I won't have any issues lining up the holes on the other side. So now I move over to installing the rear crossrails. Upon installation, I had a little issue with the rubber face that meets up with the side rail. Again, the rubber is a fitted piece, so I had to make sure to position the rubber properly so that I'd have no issues with corrosion or rust later down the road. So there we go, we have it lined up. Once I navigated through that little issue, I installed the two M6 by 25 millimeter bolts, hand tightened, again, to allow me to have some wiggle room for lining up the holes on the passenger side. Here's a close-up of the torque tool and the two M6 by 25 millimeter bolts. Now I'm going to continue lining up the holes on the passenger side so I'm able to install these bolts into the side rail. Here I am working on the rear passenger side. In the lower right video, I proceed to install the bolts on the front passenger side, screwing them in with my hand before utilizing the torque tool. Now going back to the main video, finally got the holes lined up and putting in the second bolt. Now I proceed with the torque tool to continue screwing in the bolt. When I was done torquing up the passenger side, I went back to the driver's side and re-torqued up those bolts to 9 Newton meter, and then went back to the passenger side and did the same. You want to make sure you have a snug fit. Now, in my opinion, the most tedious part of the install, here are the 4 remaining bolts, M6 by 16 millimeter bolts. On the underside of each crossrail, close to the feet, there's a hole for each one of these bolts. Now in the instructions, it does mention to not adjust the bolt adjacent to the bolts that are being installed. Now after hand screwing in the bolts, I apply torque to the bolts using the 9 Newton meter torque tool. Now, I thought about installing these bolts before installing the cross rails onto the side rails, but I do believe that if I did this, the cross rails would be too rigid, too stiff for installation onto the side rails. So as you can see, it's a little bit tedious here, especially while trying to video record it at the same time. Now here's the wraparound view of the finished install on my 2018 Buick Enclave. Now it's time to install my Thule Canyon XT with the 20-inch extension on top of these cross rails. Before putting the roof rack on top of the Enclave, I placed that piece of carpet on to prevent any dings and scratches. So I'm lining it up on top of the cross rails, spotting it to see where I need to make my minor adjustments. So, after making the minor adjustments, this is what the finished product looks like. In my opinion, this is a beautiful install. I hope this video helped you on your install of your cross rails and whatever brand of roof rack you have. Thanks for watching.